Nope, not yet. Oh,
Okay, thank you. All right, so meeting will come to order. I guess 41 Garden Street. Maria,
oh, let me let her in. Hold on.
Yeah.
And here comes Tom. Okay.
hey Todd.
Going, guys.
Okay, Maria De Mayo.
She's joining. I don't know if she's having trouble getting on or something. It says she's joining.
Okay.
So give her a minute, I guess.
I'm going to share her materials for her, so I'm just going to get all those opened up
Okay,
while we wait for her.
okay.
I think last time she was joining from a phone or an iPad, so it might just be a cell service issue.
Okay, okay. Okay,
She is gone.
she's gone.
Okay. I guess Michael Mueller. Let me sort of ask. Not on the agenda is what is it that you would like to discuss with the board?
Yeah, hi, this is Mike Mueller. I live at 43 Garden. So I live right next door to the applicant. And I
Okay.
just wanted to, today is the first I heard about this proposed fence. And I just wanted to learn more about what's going on and then weigh in on, on the fence, once I learn more about it.
Okay.
Okay, I think Maria is on. She needs to unmute. Where is she? Yeah, let me ask her. Maria,
Oh, so it looks like this. I think that she just emailed me and said that she's also on over the phone. So this 845 might also be her. Let me
okay.
ask her. Who is it?
Hi, it's Maria. Can you hear me?
Oh,
Yes, we can.
Oh, now you can. Okay. I'm trying to unmute on the computer, but won't let me.
Well, we can talk
yeah.
to you over the phone, Maria, as long as you can see our screen. Can you see us?
Well-
I can see all your faces right now.
Okay.
All right, are you trying to unmute on the icon on the lower left-hand corner or the upper right-hand corner?
Well, I've tried both. Right now I'm trying on the lower left corner where it says unmute my audio,
Okay,
and it still has the red line through it.
right, well, try in the upper right-hand corner.
Yeah, I'm hitting that, and let me see.
There's three dots.
I
Three
suggest
dots, right. There's three dots next to
Yeah.
it.
Check your volume on your computer because it sounds like there's an echo and it sounds like you are unmuted on your computer already.
Okay,
Or- That's better.
that's better. All right.
An echo, but it's not too bad.
I'm going to hang up the phone just in case. Maybe that's the because I'm on both.
Okay.
The icon next to your name still says has the mute symbol.
It does. Okay.
So might be better to just stay on the phone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Maria,
Okay.
I think as long as you can see our faces and you can see, because I'm going to share your application materials. So as long as you can see us and respond to
Okay.
what we're looking at, it's fine if you talk
Okay.
over the phone. We don't need to, as much as we would like to, we don't need to see you to conduct the.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. All right. So I'm going to open up your materials then.
Okay.
So this is, first, we have the application. This is for 41 Garden Street. This is the survey provided by the applicant. The bottom of the survey is garden. The top of the survey is the neighbor on Fair Street. And the yellow line indicates the proposed location of the fence.
Right.
And it, based on the conversation that we had last week, you've submitted some, we talked about materials. You submitted some proposed designs from a wood catalog and some from a vinyl catalog. So let's look at the wood ones first, which is what's on screen now. I guess you're proposing, you've circled a few that you kind of like, am I correct in that?
Yes, those were basically the two that I liked.
Okay,
I just want to keep them simple.
right. And this third one looks as though it's, oh, it just has a little detail along the top of the pickets.
Right.
And then further, oh, I think that's just the same one over again, 200. I'm not quite sure what the difference is between tongue and groove and solid panel. And then the last page has your finials and posts. Okay.
Looks like it's all wood, right?
Well,
I didn't-
these are the wood options that were presented by the applicant. So do we first want to discuss the materials?
Well, let's see everything that Maria submitted.
Well, the other collection is a vinyl collection,
Okay,
which we can look through that as well, but
It's
doesn't,
basically the same patterns, the plain and the lattice top.
so, oh, sorry, I skipped ahead. So this is,
Oh.
ooh. Is everyone
Okay.
seeing kind of a,
Yeah.
it looks like they're all getting a little mooched. Hold on, let me just reshare that. Hold on, I think these are just quite big files that I'm trying to. show on screen. Oh, yeah, sorry. That's just a pretty big file. Oh, man. Okay. Okay, so this is a V300 is what they're calling a solid privacy fence. Looks to be, it has the appearance of multiple pickets that are surrounded with two rails. This, as you mentioned, is a similar design, but without lattice on the top. And the last one is, oh, nothing selected on this page. Okay, so it looks like it's just those two. So those are the two that you're proposing in a vinyl construction are the solid panel and then the solid panel with the lattice on top. Is that correct? And in either, and whether it is the vinyl or the wood option, what you're proposing is a 6 foot total height. So the lattice, so it would be 6 feet to the top, and then there would be whatever the proportion is, a foot or 14 inches of lattice below it, and then the solid fence below that. Is that correct?
Right, total height of 6 feet.
Okay. Okay, so those are the sort of two material options that the applicant is proposing, as well as some kind of variations of the design within it.
Okay, can you show us the site plan again?
Yes. Oh, so here it is oriented the other way, but again, it's
Okay. Well, and the fence is proposed where the yellow highlighter is drawn.
yes.
Is there a gate anywhere in it, or is it just the fence, Maria?
No, it's just a fence.
Okay. All right. Do I have any questions or comments from the board member? And what's the spacing of the posts?
It's every 8 feet, I believe. That's how wide the panels are.
Okay. Do I have questions or comments from the board members?
Yeah, right away. I'm just trying to orient myself. This is a weak point for me. Bad with maps. So this is it. I mean, if I'm reading this correctly, it looks like it's entirely in the backyard, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Nothing on the sides.
Are you on the corner of Northern and oh no, 'cause I can see
I have neighbors. I have neighbors
on either
who are on
side.
the corner.
I
Right.
see. Yep. Okay. Now I've got it. Thanks.
Yeah, so this Northern Avenue is referring to the Garden Street is cut off, but applicant is one in from the corner. So the visibility from Garden Street is probably somewhat limited because of the house, but it's visible from Garden and Fair as well, I'd imagine.
From Northern. It's
I'm
fair.
sorry, Northern and, yes, Northern and Fair.
Okay, any other questions?
I mean, I just, don't see how this is visible
Oh, actually, I think it's very visible from Northern Avenue.
from
because-
Northern. Okay.
It depends on the time of year,
Yeah. that's good.
because my neighbors have some bushes on one end of their yard. So it depends on the angle that you're looking at when you're walking.
Yeah, we can't consider vegetation because vegetation dies and gets removed. Unfortunately.
But I think, Andrea, we looked at images last time as well. Didn't we look at some photos? Let me see if I have those.
Yeah, that would be helpful because I just can't, I'm having trouble like visualizing.
It's okay. We looked at some pictures, but I just don't think I put them on the server. So if you can just give me a minute to pull them up.
Yeah,
All right,
that'd be great.
while
Thanks.
you're looking for that, how about, do we want to consider the vinyl fence, or are we talking about just the wood?
I think just the wood
Yeah,
is where we left with the last meeting.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, I think that we have denied requests for vinyl fences before. I think the only time that we haven't the other considerations that we've made, of course, would be something of metal, which in this case isn't what the applicant needs or wants. I think that there have been some, porch railings or decks that we've approved in composite material, but nothing of this scale.
right. It's
Okay,
it's usually like Sean was just saying, like architectural elements that are pretty far away from the street, like at a certain height. But we haven't approved a fence that's final, at least during my tenure. So I would feel very uncomfortable with that.
okay, I saw Michael Mueller sent a note that he has photos.
I have them here.
Great.
So this is, everyone see this photo?
Yep.
So this would be Maria, this is the rear quarter of the yard facing Northern, is that correct?
Correct.
And then here is the kind of corner closer to the house. I guess this gray building would be Michael Mueller's house.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
And then here you can see Springbrook. And then this is the view towards the rear, towards
Fair Street.
Yeah.
So that chain link fence is on the south side, and basically the new fence would be across the back and down on the northern side of the
The
lot.
chain link is on the west side.
So the chain link is
right in the
here.
back there.
Can
Okay.
everyone
Oh.
see the survey right now?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, so the chain link is here, or a portion of it is here. And then this is the view where that forsythia was going towards Springbrook.
Got it. Okay.
Okay.
So now that
Right.
now that we can all agree that we know what we're talking about as far as where the house is.
Yeah.
and so
Um,
is the chain link fence coming out?
Yes.
Okay, so the chain link fence belongs to you, Maria, or it's on your property?
It does, yes.
Okay. Chain link to you. Okay, so I'm gonna reopen the images from the wood catalog to talk about.
Okay.
Can we also discuss the lattice? On the
Yeah,
top?
I'm gonna,
Okay, I have a comment about that. I don't mind it. In fact, I like it because it lightens up the mass. I would prefer the 300 SQL 18 on the right, that one.
yeah, I was gonna mention the same thing. So the difference between the two of these, Maria, is that it's just the orientation of the lattice. The diagonal versus the orthogonal. Is that right? Is that the word?
Orthogonal.
And what our board considers to be a more historically accurate depiction of lattice, use of lattice. So it would be the difference between what you have circled here, 300 with 21-1 topper. I think what Lloyd is saying, and I agree, if you are going to pursue a model with lattice on the top, it would be this one next to it, the SQL18 topper depicted here.
Yeah, and we approved something similar. Oh God, I'm forgetting the name of the street. I get them all confused. The house that's attached to James and Juhi's house that had an addition, and I think he came back with
Furnace.
furnace. It is furnace. Okay, yeah, I was
Right.
second guessing myself. And I believe he came back with like a fence that was kind of barely visible from the street, but he did want to screen off the commercial properties. And we approved something very similar there.
Right, and this is also pretty similar, although it's going to be a foot taller. It is similar to the 5-foot fence at Locust Ridge that we were talking about during
yeah.
our last meeting, to Locust Ridge.
Yep.
So it is a way, I think, particularly considering that this will be one of the first fences that our board has approved under the new zoning code. Having that little bit of extra air on the top, I think is going to help to decrease the overall massing of it,
Agree.
which I believe is what Maria's.
Todd, any?
Yeah, I wasn't
Yeah.
looking for total privacy. I just was more aesthetic. I want to make it somewhat appealing from my side as well as my neighbors, where they're just not looking at flat board.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with everybody about the lattice on top. I'm on the same page.
The square one.
Yes, yep.
Okay, so since we do have a neighbor, let's go ahead and see if, allow him to comment on what he sees. We can take it into consideration as we see fit. So, Mike, if you'd like to say a few words.
Yeah, hi. Really, our main concern, my wife and I, was we were concerned that the fence might be vinyl. And so if what I'm hearing you guys say is that you're leaning away from the vinyl, that would be great. We felt that the vinyl would not be in keeping with the character of our neighborhood and the village. So if it's a wooden fence, I think that's good.
Okay,
Great.
Agreed.
all right,
Well, I
so,
do have a question though.
Yeah.
About the placement. So exactly where, like how far from the property line would it be?
It's probably going to be in a couple of feet because the tree roots are in the way. So we have to bring it in like a couple of feet from the property line. I'm not sure exactly where, but it's definitely on our side.
Right, so if I was just looking at the survey, and if I'm reading the survey correctly, it looks as though the property line is about 2 feet away from the old, the old post
fence,
wire
yes.
fence. So you're saying that, so it's going to be 2 feet and then plus a little on your side?
Approximately. We haven't measured it, but I know the old fence literally is going right through one of the trees in the back. So it's definitely going to be more on my side. So the entire 4 trees that border the property line will be on your side of the fence.
Right. But so the old fence, is right in line with the maple trees. But if I'm reading the survey correctly, it looks like the actual property line is like 2 feet beyond the maple trees. Is that right?
Oh, yeah, no, well, I'm trying to think. It's right in, the fence goes literally right through the trees. Right where he's pointing now, where it says 2.2, that's about where the trees are.
So it almost sounds like, Maria, just for the sake of scale, you're proposing the fence is almost going to be sort of on the innermost line of this highlighter. I mean, that looks like it's about another 2 feet from
Yeah,
there.
I definitely want it in a little bit more. This way there's no discrepancy.
Right. And you want to clear
And I
the-
want
you
it
wanna
away
clear the
from
root.
the other fence that's there and the trees. It definitely has to be more towards my side because of the 4 trees.
Right. And
I don't want anything interfering with those.
and this, what's labeled on here as a post and wire fence, has that been removed already? Or is there a chain link
That's
on?
not, that's on Mike and Maureen's side. That's not on my area.
Oh, okay. So you're
Yeah,
just talking
that's
about this
not my
back
fence.
area. Right.
All right, so, but the question is still, how far from the property line does a new fence need to be? Or what does the village say about that?
Well, typically the fence needs to be on the owner's property. There is no minimum distance or minimum or maximum distance from
Right,
the
I
property
couldn't find
line.
anything on that either.
Well,
All right, so it just needs to be on the other side
it needs to be on
of
the,
the property line.
right, on the owner's side of the property line.
Okay.
All right, so Maria, the sense I get from the board is that what we're talking about is the lattice topped fence that we had highlighted before. Are you agreeable to that being the fence?
I actually prefer the other lattice top, but, that's your call.
Okay.
I prefer the diagonal myself, but it's your call.
All right. So board members, or do we want to go with the lattice as Maria has identified, or as Lloyd has identified? The 300 with the SQL 18 or the 215-1?
I vote for the SQL 18. It's consistent with what we ask for on houses.
Right.
So,
I agree with Lloyd.
Okay.
I don't want any inconsistencies.
All right, so do I have a motion concerning the application as modified with the SQL 18 topper?
Excuse me, Al.
Yeah.
Could I just chime in for a second? I'm the neighbor behind Maria.
Oh, okay, Ed.
Yeah, sorry.
Hi, Ed.
I didn't want to jump in
Oh, I'm
earlier.
sorry, Ed, I didn't see your comment in the
Yeah,
chat.
no, that's okay. I didn't want to interrupt, but so Maria, in the back is the idea that the fence will join the garage wall or continue across, because you only have about a foot. I know the
Right,
fence
no,
right
it's
now.
going to stop at the garage wall.
Okay, so the rest of that fence comes down or stays, or what does that
Yeah,
do?
yes, actually, yeah. The reason I didn't contact either you or Mike prior to this, I wanted to see what the board approved and wanted to give you a complete rundown of what
Yeah.
they approved and what was going to be done.
Yeah, no, I-
Maybe that was the wrong thing to do, by not contacting you, but I kind of thought rather than dragging you through the meetings, I wanted
Yeah.
to know what they would approve.
No, I mean, I have no objection to the fence and certainly defer to the board on the style. I was just worried about a few of the minor things, because at some points the fence is about a foot or maybe or more onto, across now. So
Right.
The whole fence in the back will come down even behind the garage.
Yes.
And
I mean,
what
unless
it-
for some reason you want it there, but my intention was to
No.
take the whole thing down.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you're going to attach the fence to, right to the garage, that's fine. And like I said, you really only have a foot. behind the
Yes.
garage anyway, so I don't know how you couldn't even squeeze back there if you wanted to.
No.
But are you going to remove, because there's quite a few posts, are the footings coming up with those? Because those are big pipes.
Yeah, as far as I know, they will be. Yeah, we haven't even gotten that far. Again, I wanted to see what they would approve, and then I was going
Right.
to call you and
Right.
get your input on that, because we
Okay.
talked about that last year.
Yeah, no, and as I said, I have no objection at all to the fence. I just want to make sure that the old stuff, including, I don't want to wind up with, 10 or 12 little footings across the back of the property. These little
Yeah.
concrete bombs all the way across the back. And that's really it. And then, if it's going to end right at the garage, that's fine. Like I said, there's only like a foot behind there anyway, that's yours. And, adhering to the survey would be great. It really, like I said, no objection at all to the fence as long as it goes in the right place. And the tank that's back there now that they just installed not long ago, I think you should check with your fence guys, because it looks like it's right on the line, but I could be wrong.
It's close. It's very
Yeah.
close.
Okay, your call. I just want to make sure it's all done on, on your side of it, and then we're good. I have no objection at all to the fence.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank
Ed.
you.
Thank you.
All right, so do I have a motion from the board concerning the fence with the SQL topper as presented? Do I have a motion?
I would move to accept the application as modified.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, then let's, Todd, your vote.
Aye.
Sean,
Aye.
Lloyd,
Aye.
Andrea,
Aye.
and I vote aye. So Maria, you have an approval on the fence.
Thank you.
Okay.
So
thank
Maria,
you.
Al will process your COA over the weekend and forward it to the building inspector and to the village clerk. And then
Okay.
after that, they'll be able to issue your building permit.
Okay, very good.
Okay, if anything has to change for any reason, please let us know and we can just take a look at it again.
Okay, now are we okay with the topper for the posts that I picked? Does that have to be approved as well? It's just a very basic one.
That's approved as part of this application as well. I don't,
Yeah.
no one has any objection to it as far as I'm aware.
Yeah,
Okay,
it's a pretty standard top.
And it looks like your posts are of an appropriate size as well, so.
Right.
That's, yeah, I mean, that's the top that we see often elsewhere in the village.
yeah, it's pretty standard.
All right,
Okay.
thank you.
Thanks so much.
Okay. You need anything else from me?
Nope.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right,
Okay.
Maria.
Aye.
Aye.
All right,
Um,
bye-bye.
Right. Okay,
you.
I see Eric is at the meeting, so I guess we can talk about the conversation that we had concerning precedents as far as which board goes where. So, Eric, do you want me to sort of recap the conversation that or the email exchange that we had?
Sure.
The issue is the question when an application is referred to both the Historic District Review Board and the Zoning Board of Appeals. Which one goes first? There's always been, and actually, just for your information, it also refers to the Planning Board, because some applications have to go to the Planning Board and they may be modified, and they have that would also have an impact on the approval that they would get from both your board and our board. So the question becomes who goes first, and basically the policy as it is right now is that it would go to the zoning board first, and then come to us, and that was based on the fact that there was an application, and I guess Sean, you can tell us exactly who it was, but where it went to us and we gave them approval, and then it went.
That's not exactly what happened. It was, we met
Okay.
with them in a workshop session.
All right, and then they went to the zoning board of appeals, and they got denied at the zoning board of appeals, and they felt offended, and I think they threatened legal action. I don't know if that ever actually happened, saying that, you know, when we gave them approval, then they assumed that they would get approval from the zoning board. So the question, yeah, say that again.
Which application was that?
It was the application for 21 Parsonage Street. I think it was before you were on the board, Lloyd. It was maybe the end of 2019, summer 2019.
Okay, yeah,
It was a little bit, just to, yeah, basically what happened was we met with them first in workshop, as Al said. We reviewed the application. It was the opinion of our board that the property should, that the existing building should be modified in its place and not be moved or anything like that. It was an existing non-conformity to the site, but it also would have required for it to have been receive a number of variances. Eric, were you? I don't think you were on the board at the time, were you?
Yes, I was on that board. I was not the chair at that time.
Oh, right. Because it was Aaron, but he was recused. Yeah.
Right, it was an old barn, and it required something like 6 or 7 different variances.
So yeah, that was
But the details of that application really, I don't think have much relevance to our decision tonight, except insofar as that caused the former mayor to establish a policy that we live with today, which is that the ZBA must always go first before the HDRB. And I think that it's not clear that the current village trustees want to continue that policy, or that we all agree with it ourselves. In fact, I think we don't, from the exchange.
Well, and the thing I contributed to the conversation is that the issue about which board goes first, and I do have to point out that we haven't had any problems or any such sequencing problems or issues dealing with the planning board, but in the past there have been cases where an applicant had to go back and forth based on decisions of the planning board and the historic district review board. So, but the point I was making is that this issue has been around for quite a while, and we have had this, it has come up in the past. And basically a couple of years ago, and this is when Phillips was the mayor, we had a meeting of all the chairs of the board and the mayor, and I think one other board of trustee. And the decision was that the way to handle it is to have the building inspector guide the applicant as far as what sequence they're supposed to follow. And that's because ultimately the building inspector or the code enforcement official is the one who needs to get all the various approvals in order to issue a construction permit. So he is the best, the person who's best are in the best position to advise the applicant as far as which the sequence they should go. But I know the policy was that you know, whatever, and from that that meeting, that's the policy of having a referral from the building inspector, and we're supposed to only review applications that are referred to us. That's where that originated. Because prior to that, you didn't really need to even have seen the building inspector before coming to any of the boards. So I think what Eric had suggested is that that we add some language to our application forms, which discusses this particular issue. I'm a little doubtful that that would help all that much, because ultimately most people usually rely on either the village clerk or the building inspector to guide them through the process one way or another. If it is added to any application, I would think it maybe should be added to the application for the building permit, since ultimately the building inspector really should be the one who's guiding people. So
Al, I just have a question about the sequencing. So are you saying that prior to the discussion with Mayor Phillips, it was not required that people had to apply for a building permit in order to apply to the HDRB for the COA?
Yep.
Okay. I guess if we're talking about processes in general, is that also something that we want to consider, whether that is still an efficient way of reviewing applications? I mean, it does require additional money upfront for an applicant who could potentially, just be trying to get information about what's possible for a project without applying for the permit itself.
well, I don't think that. I mean, there is a lot of work that may not necessarily require a building permit. I think that, again, the referral makes sense, and I don't know if a referral, if there's any reason why a referral can't be given without actually having to apply for a building permit.
I agree. I mean, I don't know how you feel about it, Eric, but I feel like for the things that our board approves, it certainly would be reasonable that somebody could submit an application, an HDRB application to us, and we could approve it or deny it or workshop it or whatever, with much different information than they would need to provide to the building inspector for an actual building permit. And especially with people who are interested in finding out sort of whether or not a project is even feasible. I certainly wouldn't want them to have to go too deeply into engineering or architectural design just to find out that it's something that we wouldn't approve. But I think that's a kind of sidebar conversation, but I didn't realize that it was based on, that it came from this same thing that we're talking about. That's when the building inspector became involved in the sort of denial of the application and the referral process. I think and Al and Eric and I discussed this over email, but I mean, I feel that there are the instances where this is an issue are few and far between, but some of them can be kind of significant. So I think what I would propose would be a way of just simply having our board have some sort of ability to, for any application that is referred to both the ZBA and HDRB, have HDRB, have an ability to kind of review an application with a kind of thumbs up or thumbs down of whether or not we want to workshop it or anything like that before it goes to ZBA. I don't think it has to happen every single time. I think a huge thing that we used to do, we used to require that any applicant who was looking for now that the laws changed, but any applicant who was looking for a taller than 4-foot fence would have to go through everything with ZBA first because it was a waste of our time. But I think with other things, I mean, particularly having to do with additions or changing the size of decks or porches or things, some of them probably aren't a huge deal, but some of them can be really, really significant changes to a property. And for an applicant to go through the whole ZBA process without us ever actually even seeing it, unless we're, reading the legal notices or attending the ZBA meetings, we could be putting people down a kind of an unsustainable path. But all that being said, if it is something that can be done, if it's something that can be done via email from Al or via if it's something that can be decided outside of session, I feel like that would be the most efficient way of dealing with it. And if ultimately we decide that it's something that the project itself is pressing or problematic or should be addressed before it goes to ZBA, we would just have a workshop with them, similarly to what we did with 20 Church Street. That wasn't because of a ZBA concern. That was just because they were curious about what they could do with the project. And so we met with them in workshop and then talked about the design, sent them to ZBA. They went through their process and then came back to us.
Yeah, I think that the one thing we have to be careful of is that not to make any decisions, where one or two people make a decision for the board, because that sort of goes against the open meeting laws that we all have to work with. So anything that is decided by the board has to be done by the board in a public meeting. I see, what you're talking about right now is really a specific instance, and I don't know if where we're talking about precedence between the zoning board and the HDRB, but I do have to press the fact that there are instances where the same problem of precedence has occurred with the planning board, because the planning board will also have an impact on how a lot is laid out, what are the requirements that the planning board requires. So I think that it would be the process has to accommodate all of the boards that the village has.
Well, again, I think it could be a similar type of thing. I don't know. I can't think off of the top of my head of something that we've had to look at recently, which was referred to the planning board first and then to us and didn't require ZBA. I guess 40 Main went to the planning board, but they weren't done with their process before we approved the adjustments that were made to the storefront, to the doors and front of the building. We approved that without approval of the planning board. Did you have to look at that, Eric? Probably not, right? Because the building didn't change. Yeah. So, I'm thinking of projects where, basically people are looking to do any sort of addition, or certainly any, the adding of an additional story or an expansion of something, building out over a attached garage or, a rear addition.
Yeah, but the thing that you have to keep in mind is that under the village law or the village ordinances, any application aside from residential needs to be reviewed by the planning board.
Sure.
There's also a provision in the law that requires any application for an area variance that comes before the planning board has to be forwarded, or it comes to the zoning board, has to be forwarded to the planning board in advance of the hearing. It's an obscure point that has not always been followed, but the planning board always knows about, in theory, should always know about every application before the zoning board.
So in that instance, Eric, what is the sort of sequence there? So if something comes in and it's a change in floor area and you you forward it to the planning chair, then are they required to meet in session to discuss it? Or does the planning chair simply tell you, we don't care? Or, I mean, what actually happens there?
The wording of the law is that the planning board may at its discretion take action. So it receives it's more of an FYI type of thing. It
Right.
receives it and the chair does not necessarily make any, so far he's made no response because
Right.
nothing has risen to the level of requiring a response. So it's an FYI notification.
Which is sort of what I'm getting at, I guess. It's just a question of, whether or not our response is one that needs to be made in a public session, or whether it is, because ultimately what I would not want would be to have a firm requirement that every application which goes between that's referred to ZBA and to the HDRB has to have an in-session workshop before ZBA can go forward. Because there's going to be so many that are so inconsequential as far as what we are looking out for. But, there are going to be those which are significant. So I don't know what what's the most efficient way of doing it so that nothing goes too far into the process of one board without the other board knowing what's going on, but also doesn't add a really unnecessary step to a lot of applications.
See, that's where I think that the building inspector is the perfect person to make these judgment calls, because the building inspector has to understand what the applicant is applying for, because they have to make a determination. Are there any zoning issues? Are there any other issues that require the application to go before the planning board? And then they have to collect, the either the certificate of appropriateness or the variance, the approval of a variance in order for the application to go forward. So I think that's why I think that ultimately keeping the process in the realm of the building inspector is probably the best, because the building inspector is the one who has the most information. I think that periodically what we should probably do is have a joint meeting with the building inspector so that they understand the things that we would be looking for. Like certainly one of the issues that the building inspector should understand is what happens with a repair. In other words, according to our current code, we make the decision as to whether or not something is a repair and therefore doesn't need to come to us. But a building inspector may not necessarily know that unless they're very intimately familiar with the village ordinances. So that's why I think the building inspector is probably the best place where those sort of decisions are made.
But I think that that's putting a lot of responsibility on the building inspector to be very up to date with standards of historic preservation best practices. I mean, I think that that's
no, not really. I mean,
well,
they
I mean,
just
I don't want to put too fine a point on this, but I mean, the building inspector, did not alert us to the fact that they referred a project to the ZBA that was going to put a massive addition on the front facade of a house in our historic district. I mean, that is a clear example of a project that we should have looked at before it went to the ZBA. And I am not saying that the ZBA did anything wrong in their review of that project at all. I mean, they followed their standards, but it was clearly in conflict with our design standards.
all right.
And I think that had we had an opportunity to speak to the applicant earlier in the process, we could have come to a much better agreement about how they could increase the livable floor area of their home. I mean, I don't think that was the only option for them. But again,
Well,
I think that Historic District Review Board, it is our responsibility to be people who are experienced in preservation. And I think that we can rest assured that while the general skill set of our building inspectors going forward could be varied, we, you know, our code requires the HDRB to be people who are familiar with preservation best practices.
I think you overestimate what the sort of decision that they have to make. I think that the question really is whether or not any exterior change needs to be reviewed by the historic district. Now, if I think the instance you're talking about is whether or not it went to the ZBA as opposed to going to as opposed to coming to us first. You know, that's a different question, and I think that becomes also a question for the applicant, because certainly the building inspector can make recommendations and say this is what you ought to do, but the building inspector has no final say over, you know, where an applicant has to go first. Right? They can recommend to them, but ultimately, if the applicant wants to go to the ZBA first, then I can't see how we are in any kind of position to stop them. So I think that
Well, the previous mayor's policy, when I specifically offered another applicant an opportunity to discuss something with us in workshop before they went to the ZBA, we were told explicitly that we were not to speak to any applicant until they had their variances. So it doesn't sound like an applicant can decide to come to us, at least.
I know, and I don't necessarily agree with the mayor's policy, because that, to me, that's a very simplistic response to a specific issue that he had with the previous application. And I think, to me, that's therein lies the problem, is that there are so many different permutations and combinations that, you know, to come up with a simple rule that addresses all issues is next to impossible.
Right. So I guess what our options are either we go first, ZBA goes first, or it's some combination of the two. And
And how about the planning board?
Or yeah, well, then it's some combination of the three. But I think what my proposal was, again, was that it is, I don't have an issue with the ZBA or the planning board. I don't have an issue with there being a sequence from one board to the next, and whether it's planning to ZBA to HDRB or in any combination of those. But I think before an applicant goes too far down the road with any one of those three boards, the other two boards at least have an opportunity to review the application in concept and, you know, raise any necessary red flags before they're given information which is you know, going to be problematic down the line.
All right, I think I know Eric raised the question about simultaneous reviews, and as long as the applicant is aware that you know, the simultaneous review may result in having to go back to a certain board in order to get you know, another approval based on changes that the other board has asked for. I think all of these are viable options. I don't see any reason why that couldn't be done. And so I think that ultimately, and see, you know, again, go ahead, Lloyd.
I'm just wondering, I mean, I guess we're debating this because we don't necessarily have to follow the old mayor's ruling, right?
Right.
Right.
And then I'm thinking about this process in many other jurisdictions. It's landmarks first, and then everything else. Well, landmarks are historic, right? I mean, I'm thinking about every project I've ever dealt with that's historic. In my professional capacity, in New York City, you go to the Landmarks Commission, absolutely first thing all the time. And every other jurisdiction, I've had the same experience. And then the community board, and then you get a permit after you get all those approvals. And of course, if there's zoning and planning in there too, but. I mean,
I
I'm
think in
I'm
instances
just
of,
throwing that out as an example. I'm not saying that that's the right way. I can see an argument for simultaneous reviews and I mean, I guess I can also see the building inspector making the decision and even picking up the phone and
I think,
right,
I,
discussing it first.
right, which is also kind of what I'm proposing, Lloyd, that we just discuss it. Instead of having a fixed policy, there's a little bit more of a discussion.
so, what we have here is a situation where there are multiple interested parties, but no one is obviously the solution. No one is obviously the key to the door who should. It did not work to tell the building inspector, because we just had a building inspector who for several years never did this task. And the building inspector has no incentive to take on this responsibility. And may not have.
I disagree with that, because ultimately, doesn't the building inspector need the approvals in order to issue a permit? I know that
Well, he'll get them anyway. He'll get them regardless of what the applicant does with the sequencing.
right. So, but I mean, isn't it to his incentive in order to advise the applicant the best way to proceed in order to get the approval?
Well, the building inspector has no incentive for the applicant to get the approval. The building inspector has an incentive to get applications off his or her desk. That's the main incentive. And what I was leading up to is the person with the most incentive to get this process right is the applicant. The applicant is at the center of it all. If it doesn't work right, the person who will suffer the most is the applicant. And that's why I favor putting the information in the hands of the applicant, urging the applicant to reach out to various possible parties for advice and come up with a solution that suits. The applicant knows his or her project best and should be encouraged to seek answers. It may be the building inspector in some cases, it may be an informal request to informal inquiry to one of the boards or the other board. It will all depend change from application to application. So that's to me, it's the only way it's going to work, is to put it in writing in front of the applicant and then let the chips fall where they may, because the responsibility then rests with the person who really has a reason to pay attention to this issue.
I totally agree with Eric.
Plus, there's the key issue of the applicant has, apparently, from what we've talked about, the applicant has a right to a simultaneous review. And that's a big deal. If you're an applicant, it means a difference of weeks in your timeline. And the applicant needs to know that they have that right, instead of being through lack of information, going with a simultaneous going with a sequential process that wasn't necessary. So that's a further reason for putting all the information in the hands of the applicant.
Right, and I don't think we should worry about, the fact that, I mean, I don't mean to sound callous about this, but if they can look at the fees and their project and their situation, and some people don't mind, as long as it goes more quickly. So we can let them make that decision based on their project and their situation.
Yeah, they know their project best. I agree.
All right.
I would argue that, the adjacent neighbors also have a vested interest in the project being successful as well. So I don't think that it's solely in the best interest of the applicant. in the best interest of the applicant and also our historic district as a whole. But
Well, that and also, the vested interest of the applicant is to get what they want done. And at times that may not be in concert with what the objectives of the HDRB or the zoning board is.
Exactly.
I mean, there is a lot of stuff that has been built here without any applications or approvals by anybody. And, just the owner hires a contractor and the next thing, and typically it's done during the day because that's when everybody is off at work. And the building inspector was part-time and basically they never bothered looking at it until they had to, because they were on a part-time basis. So I'm not totally sure that we can rely on the applicant's best interest, but if the applicant, if that's the approach that we want to take, the question becomes, when is this information transmitted to them? And I guess my question is that if we put it on our application, and if the applicant doesn't think he needs to go to the Historic District Review Board, he's never going to see that information. And if you put it on the zoning board, how does the applicant know that he needs to go to the zoning board? I think that it probably should be, if it is a written document, it probably should be a standalone document, which is part of the permit application process, and we can talk about it and maybe go into an explanation a little bit further. But I think that sort of going back to Sean's question, the issue is that we're relying on the building inspector, or rather, well, we're relying on the building inspector giving the applicant all of the information that they need. And I'm not totally sure that, well, I'm just being cynical, but in my experience, I'm not totally sure that the applicant really wants to have any contact with any of the boards.
Al, I have a question on this. Earlier you had said that it's the determination of whether or not something is considered a repair or a replacement in kind.
Right.
Is that something that, I know that in the past we have met a couple of times on applications that we have collectively declined to review after looking at them and realizing that they were outside of the purview, outside of the, reasonable visibility from the right of way.
Right.
In instances of, repairs, I mean, I'm sure that there have been times where the building inspector has reached out to the chair or perhaps the vice chair, but not me, asking whether this is something that we would consider to be a replacement in kind or a repair. And before we've even looked at an application, we have given them an answer. Isn't that the case?
I don't
I mean,
think so.
I will say that personally, the building inspector called me, the previous building inspector called me a couple of months ago about a material change on a application, asking whether or not it was something that we would have to review and sign off on. And it ultimately was an entirely different issue. But I mean, would that not be something that could be determined outside of session? And I guess the reason why I'm asking this is because if we are given that ability, then what prevents us from saying that anytime a application is referred to more than one board, the building inspector needs to contact the 2 or 3 chairpersons of those respective boards and ask whether they want to review the application in workshop before it continues?
Well, I mean,
that might be a question.
What you're proposing is sort of something along the lines of a secret process, in that you send a form around saying that an application for let's say change to a building has been filed, and is this something that you think should come before your board. Is that what you're talking about?
No, it's not a question of whether or not it should come before the board. It's a question of whether or not we want to, it's a question of whether, it's a question of how early we want to provide some degree of feedback to the applicant. And it could be because it could be something that affects all of the other boards. I mean, it could be something which, you know, if somebody is coming to the planning board asking to turn a house into a garage, you know, they could say, fine, and they could get a variance from Eric. And I mean, we could be literally the third in line of turning a house into a garage. Whereas if we were the first people to look at it, in 9 times out of 10, we would say, no way. You know, I mean, it's that, I think it's something as simple as, you know, reviewing an application. I would be concerned about simultaneous applications between our board and the ZBA because, and correct me if I'm wrong, Eric, I'm sure that there have been instances in the lower village where all the lots are tiny, where, you know, an initial variance could be requested going into a rear setback or a side setback that is negotiated from, you know, 7 feet to 5 feet or something like that. As far as we're concerned, in terms of architectural detailing, that could be significant. And we don't want to be in a situation where we have worked with an applicant through the sort of appropriate design of a, you know, an addition or a porch or something, only for them to find out that it needs to be 2 feet shorter, or, you know, or 2 feet shorter and then 4 feet longer in the back to make up for it. So I do think that there's a certain courtesy that we owe applicants, that they're not going to be kind of designing and redesigning projects based on an inconsistency of purview between our 3 boards, of course. But
Sorry, go ahead.
no. But I also think that there needs to be on the front end of it, there also just needs to be an opportunity for the chairs to say, this is this, you know, as proposed, we have an issue with whatever, and we should really talk about it. I mean, I think, again, with the property on 21 Parsonage Street, you know, it was an issue of the number of variances that they needed. I think had that project moved forward, had that project received the variances that it needed and been redesigned to either, you know, avoid the variances or whatever, I think ultimately it would have been a project that our board would have a lot of difficulty approving. I mean, I think that's an example of something that should have had a more holistic review. I think that there are probably 99% of the other applications, it's not really that big of a deal.
Okay, so then what is the mechanism that you
solve too many problems for people, though? You give them a workshop, the ability to come to a workshop and get the information, and then they can go off and strategize. And I mean,
I think that's really all that I'm asking for, Lloyd. I think all I'm asking for is that the policy be that an applicant is.
Let Lloyd finish.
Never had anybody hold my hand as much as you're proposing. I have to go figure it out. I have to meet with the various boards on projects I work on in a certain order sometimes, and I will learn things from one that will affect what we do, and you have to take into consideration all of them, and sometimes you have to go back more than once. I don't know how you can clean that process up. I feel like there's always going to be it's not always a clean process, right?
Right. And so I think that the way that we clean it up is by having the workshops, having the ability to conduct these workshops.
Okay, but Sean, here's my question. What you're advocating is that all of the boards be aware of an application that has been submitted, so that we all know what the other boards may ultimately be looking at. How does that process work? How do the notifications go to all of the boards?
I think if a project is specifically referred to multiple boards, then I don't know. I mean, we can either do it based on the calendar of who's next meeting, or we can do it alphabetically, or we can pick straws out of a hat. But if
Okay.
if an application is referred to 3 of the different boards or 2 of the 3 boards, they should have to have a workshop with each of those 2 boards before they proceed forward with the application. I think that it's, and then
Okay.
to Lloyd's point, they can choose to ask more questions or go back or whatever, but I just don't think that it's appropriate that the building inspector or
But
the
who
mayor,
does
as it previously was, decides unilaterally that an application must be totally complete with one board before any of the others have an opportunity to.
Okay, but let's put Mirandy's memo or Mirandy's rule aside, because that is something that I don't think anybody really supports. So the question really is that it still boils down to the referral from the building inspector. So ultimately, that's where it starts, at the building inspector.
Right.
And if a building inspector gives out and see, in the past, for example, when Bajarski was the building inspector, he would issue referrals, separate referrals to the different boards. He wouldn't do what Charlotte wound up doing towards the end, where he issued one referral for multiple boards. But I guess, the question becomes, maybe that's the way it should go. And then when we see that there is there is another board involved, then we can initiate some discussion with the other board. Does that sound like?
Sean,
Yeah, I think
Sean,
that
could I
sounds
ask you?
great.
I was wondering what, I might help if we look back at an application that did not go well, 20 Church Street, as you mentioned. What was it that prevented your board? You mentioned that your board felt boxed in because the applicant already had received a variance. Why did you feel boxed in?
That wasn't 20 Church Street. I was talking 20 Church Street did go well. It was 17 Parsonage Street.
Right. Okay. So why did you feel boxed in?
I mean, I personally felt like the project as proposed was totally inappropriate based on our design standards. And I think
what kept you from just saying that?
I didn't. I voted
To the
against it.
applicant.
I voted against the application. I found it to be very inappropriate. But what I'm saying is, I think that if that was the first conversation that the applicant had with the village and not the 7th or 8th conversation, it would have been a much different situation. And so I guess all I'm saying is, I think that if what I am proposing is simply that if an application is referred to 2 or 3 of the boards, that they just conduct a simple workshop with each of the boards and then decide how they want to proceed. I don't think that it should be, I don't think that I don't think that there should be necessarily a hierarchy of the boards. If there is going to be a hierarchy of the boards, then I think we should go first, because obviously that is where I of course have no reason to believe that we aren't the most important board. So if we are going to be changing the sequence, we should always go first. If it's not, if we're going to be a little bit more open-minded, then I think we should each have an opportunity to workshop the application with the applicant, or simply tell them out of session, get your variances, and then we'll talk about it. Nothing, whatever you're looking at right now is totally within the realm of possibilities. Get your variances or get your, whatever change of use from planning department. I mean, I think ultimately, outside of new construction or redevelopment, planning is really, as far as change of use is concerned, for us, it's very minimal. I mean, I can't really think of any, change of use as far as businesses are concerned that really rose to a big issue with us.
But realistically, on most applications, it should go to us first. And I'm not saying that just because I have a personal preference and because I'm on this board. I'm saying that because a lot of what we look at as we look at it according to the code, but a lot of what we look at is seen. I'm not saying that it is, but it's seen to be more subjective, and you should go to us first, and then it should go to planning. If we have to have an order.
But
For the
you know,
more-
why are we trying to come up with an order when in
Yeah.
fact there are so many different, like I said,
know.
permutations and
They can come to-
combinations?
They can come to a free workshop, right? And then we're almost free.
Well,
And figure it out.
didn't Maria come to a free workshop? I mean, we have never turned away anybody from a free workshop, whether
Never.
they were referred to us or not, because I don't see a referral for Maria's fence.
We have a referral for it.
Do we? Okay,
Yeah,
well,
we have an application. It was
Yeah,
approved.
we had a good session with her. She came back and it worked out. just-
right. And so I don't think that we should sit there and try and establish a precedence, de facto precedence of which board sees it first. I think that, I think it's a very good point that perhaps there should be a discussion. But I think that here's what I would propose. I think that the building inspector needs to sit with the applicant, review the application, and then make referrals. If he has to refer the application to more than one board, it should be done on one document so that the boards know
Yeah.
that there is another referral in the works. And I think then we have to come up with a mechanism, and I think it's too late at night to actually think this through, but there should be another mechanism where the boards get together to decide what the order of precedence, or at least meet with the applicant so that there is some discussion as far as who goes first, or if they want to, they can go simultaneously, as long as they know that approval of one board does not necessarily guarantee an approval on the other. So that's what I suggest.
That makes sense to me, but the hard part remains of working out that mechanism.
Yeah.
It would help if the village had a more robust form of online collaboration so that it was smoother and more effortless for these applications to be posted and reviewed online. If everything could automatically be posted, it wouldn't have to be a publicly accessible site at this stage. If there was a way that automatically incoming applications were posted, so when we receive the referral, we could go to the sharing site, flip through the application and leave comments right there. The chair could then just leave comments and say, I see nothing important. I see no real problems here. The applicant could do whatever he or she likes as far as sequence, or raise
I think-
objections.
I mean, we're dealing with everything electronically. Why don't we set up that early phase similarly? Is there any reason why we couldn't do that?
I think that sounds like a great idea. So I will speak with Jeff and see what the best way of doing that is. I mean, we use Google Drive for all of our stuff, Eric. I don't know how you guys share documents. But I know that the village is also thinking about investing in some sort of a more robust project management plan. So in the short term, it may be a little clunky, but I think that that's a great way of moving forward. So
that and also I think that we, unfortunately, we're in a period where we don't have our own building inspector, and so the town inspector is not going to be all that. I mean, I don't know. My experience has been that the town inspector really doesn't care.
Well, that's part-time, right?
Well, he's pretty full-time, but he's got the whole
Us.
town
Yeah.
right.
to deal with, and so he apportions his efforts accordingly. So I think that what we're going to have to do is is ask Karen and Jeff to be the sort of the gatekeeper or the traffic cop as far as how the applications get processed.
Great.
Because aren't they the ones who issue the referrals now? Or is that done by the town inspector?
I'm not sure. They're signed by Greg. I'm not sure if Jeff is the one that actually does it. They're signed by Karen. Do you know how that happens?
I think it's still coming from the town. I don't think Jeff is doing that, making that decision
Okay.
on his own, but I'll be in tomorrow. I'll talk to him about it. I know I certainly haven't done it, nor would you want me to.
We have to work out some further aspect of this. Simply setting up the online sharing project management site is not enough, because if you think about the sequence of events, the applicant receives the referral naming 2 or sometimes 3 boards, and currently receives no other information about how to proceed. And so the applicant has to make a decision about where to apply, and may make the wrong decision. So the applicant would need some information. So I don't know what we would.
Well, I think we can have an instruction sheet. I mean, each of our application forms comes with an instruction sheet. So why not have one more instruction sheet? And if the applicant wants to delve into it, he can delve into it to the depth that he or she wants to. Not being misogynistic, sorry about
Well, I think the question too, as well, Eric, to what you're sort of picturing, is this something? Is this review by the board chairs something which would occur before the referral is actually given to the applicant?
No, it would follow the referral. And the question is, what does the applicant do then to inform the various chairs? What do the chairs look at? We can't wait till the applicant produces an application, because then the decision has already been made about where to go first. Would it work if, when the applicant receives the referral naming 2 boards, the instruction sheet tells the applicant to provide simply a site plan and a 1-paragraph description, say? That's all. It's not a full application for either board, but just enough to give the core of the idea here. Submit that to the clerk, who immediately posts on the project sharing site with a checkoff sheet for the chairs, and the chairs look at it, make their comments and their advice, and possibly draw in others, and possibly get back to the applicant for further information. And then the applicant, then it's turned back over to the applicant, and that person makes the decision how to proceed at that point. And the applicant could exercise the right to have a simultaneous submission and take the risks, or follow any sequence. But at least then the applicant has information. Is it informed about what the stakes are and what's involved?
I think that we have the outlines of a good solution. I think, obviously it needs to be tweaked and examined further, and we can get the input from the planning board and from Jeff, and see what he thinks. And if the town inspector wants to chime in, he can probably add his 2 cents. But I think that I think that makes a lot of sense. I think there's having a place where you can go online and put your preliminary application, and then let the various boards. Obviously, somebody needs to make a decision as far as a referral, and that probably is the code enforcement official. And then once that is done, then the board members or somebody from the board, either the chair or vice chair, can go and take a look at the materials and ask for further information or put in some comments as far as issues that would probably have to be discussed. And at least then that gives the applicant the information that he needs to make a decision as far as which, where he wants to go first. I mean, if there are no HDRB issues or there are no zoning issues, then it's pretty straightforward. The applicant just proceeds with his own work. But I mean, I think this is a good mechanism where the applicant will get good information from each of the various boards concerning their procedures.
Great. As a button on that, would we want to discuss with the trustees the necessity of somebody applying for a building permit first in order to do any of this? Or would we want to give applicants the opportunity to apply individually to the boards?
Well, I think that doesn't make sense for the ZBA. The zoning board is an appellate board that exists to have oversight over actions by the building inspector. We, except in the case of interpretation requests, but normally we respond only to actions by the building inspector. So in the normal course of business, we would not ever take it. We would not ever do anything unless the building inspector first takes an action. So we would never, no resident would come directly to us normally.
Right, okay.
So this is really just a question for it would only happen with your board most of the time. So there would never be a question of referral to or going to multiple boards, residents on their own initiative going to 2 boards at once.
Yeah, I think I would have to agree with Eric that the whole concept of bouncing ideas and workshopping some concepts is really a creature of the HDRB. I think even, for example, the planning board theoretically, but usually when you start dealing with planning board issues, it really is much more technical, and I'm not sure that they deal with concepts as opposed to compliance with the village ordinances, village zoning, and stuff like that. So,
well, that's actually not true. There is a great degree of workshopping and conceptual bouncing around involved in just getting the applicant to, often, not always, but often, to getting the applicant to correctly frame the request in terms of the law. It's not always clear. The applicant wants to achieve a certain task. It's not always, and has been told that he or she can't, but it's not always clear how to get around that or how to adapt the request so that it conforms acceptably to the law. And that needs, so sometimes we've received applications that were just framed badly, that would, in a way that did not serve the applicant's interest. And so we work with the applicant to reframe the application so that it's like a key that fits the right lock suddenly. And so what I was responding to was Sean's idea of a resident coming to a board without a building permit, whether that's a possibility and whether the trustees would allow that and whether it makes sense. But that particular point is the one I was responding to that does not make sense for the ZBA.
right. But and what I was addressing is the fact that for the HDRB, it does make sense. And that probably of the 3 boards, it makes the most sense because we would like to speak with the applicants as early as possible in the process. But the planning board would also be in the situation because, for example, there are a lot of different ways that people try to accomplish compliance with the various. I mean, the planning board to a large extent enforces the zoning ordinances, you're the appellate version of that process, but the planning board ensures compliance or regulates compliance with the planning process. So I think they would also be, I think as far as the conceptual workshopping, we probably would be the most applicable to that. And you obviously would be the least, but there are things that workshops would make sense in the context of your board. So okay, so Sean, can you talk with Jeff and see about the process of setting up a system like this and see if there's there is a certain way we can do this and make sure everybody is appraised of what's going on.
Sure.
Okay. So and what we'll do is I guess we'll come up with a proposal and we'll float it past you, Eric, and is what's his name still the chair of the planning board?
Jack Goldstein.
Oh, okay. Matt Francisco.
He's on it, but he's not the chair.
He's not the chair. Jack's the chair.
Okay. So I think that we ought to get all the boards involved, and I'm not totally sure that there's, unless there's some requirement, and you may want to ask Jeff this, that whether or not we really need to speak to the village board of trustees, because I see this as us working out the process in which applicant applies, or the procedures for each of the boards. But
I
if,
think we'll probably, once we're all in agreement how we feel it's best to proceed, we will probably want to alert the trustees that that's how we're planning.
let them give the old blessing and
Right.
carry
I'm
on.
sure they will be happy if it is efficient and legal.
Right. Okay.
Okay, great.
All right. I guess 9:10. Do we want to put this off until, I have to ask one thing, because
All right, do we want to thank Eric for his time and allow him to leave? Or is this a question
Yes.
for him?
no, this is a question about the design.
Thank you for your time,
standards.
Eric.
Thank you for taking the question up.
Of course.
Okay, design standards. Now, I went through the previous design standards that we had, and the current version. And something struck me, which I just wanted to run past everybody. We're not going to stay up late, because at this point, we're all ready to pack it in. But before I pursue this course of action. So with that, let me share my screen.
Okay.
I don't know where you're heading with this, but my suggestion would be to pare back what we are trying to get done, because we expanded it recently and we're not.
Well, here is what I'm a little bit concerned about. Come on, computer, wake up. Okay. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
It's a little small, but yeah.
All right, I'll try to make it bigger. Oh, that's right. You have to do it this way.
Yeah, well, had that changed on Bluebeam?
PCs, boy, PCs.
Well, they're generally very functional, but something's weird.
All right.
right?
So here is my frame of my logic, And yeah, I just want to see if everybody is in agreement before I start doing this. So we have all of this design standards A to Z. And the thing that sort of started me down this train of thought is the fact that there were a lot of these, you know, for exterior lighting, go see context and compatibility section. And that's repeated quite often. So I said, well, okay, if that's the case, let me take a look at complex and context and compatibility. And basically what I found is that in the 1999 version of the design standards, the bulk of the direction concerning various topics was in the design standards A to Z. In this particular version, a lot of that information is expanded and goes into greater detail in the context and compatibility, which is fine. And what my thought was is that, well, okay, I'll just continue my train of thought. So then I started looking at, I went back to the design standards A to Z, and I noticed that we had a lot of very short sections which referred to context and compatibility. But then we also had a lot of long sections, such as masonry. And it seemed like it was a little muddled as far as what they were trying to say. And then, you know, in looking at this, I noticed that we have
a masonry section at the end.
Yeah, an appendix, which is masonry. And it was not very informational. All right, yeah, here. See the selected guidance on materials conservation stone masonry. And that's it, which seems to, the thought is that, okay, the design standards A to Z, why don't we minimize that and just use that to reference other sections and take out the information and put it in areas where the explanation is a little bit more more informative. So, for example, that's the portion of the masonry in the A to Z. A lot of that information is brought into here and incorporated into this resource guide. And if we do that, and you know, we wind up taking out some of the areas that are not necessary, I think that it'll shrink that particular section, but the information is still there. It's just in different places. So what do you guys think?
Makes some sense to me. I think I'm really connecting with what you said about this resource guide 6 here being very short, and you know, and then just kind of imbalanced the way the other, you know, you got 3 columns about masonry there that seem to be rambling, and then you have a whole section here which has like nothing in it.
Yeah, Al, I'm glad you brought it to our attention. You're right, it's awfully repetitive and could be you know, rearranged in a more logistical manner.
Yeah, I don't, you know, I don't want to dive too deeply into changing stuff because there's a lot of effort going into it. It's just that if there are certain other sections that I think should be moved, what I can do is I can fashion some text and you know, say we can drop it in here. So let me do that.
Okay.
And then what we'll do is we'll talk about it once I wrap my mind around the whole process.
Sorry, I think I just misunderstood what you said, Al, though. Are you saying that you want to take the A to Z masonry and put it here, or you want to put
Yeah.
the resource guide stuff into the A to Z?
No, the eight, the thing that struck me was that, like I said, in 1999 version, most of the specific information direction concerning, how you should do something was in the A to Z.
Right.
What has happened is that in this version, a lot of that information was really put into context and compatibility.
Okay.
And that left certain areas where there was a lot of information, and it happened to be that one of those is the stone masonry. And so what my thought is that if we take that information, the A to Z is then shrunk down to something where it's just a reference where to go to find some information on how you should do something. And it's not the same level of detail and complexity as in the 1999 version.
Okay, so then masonry stays in resource 6, or it goes in, you're gonna have a masonry section in the context and compatibility?
No, I think the context and compatibility has a lot of information, and I think that what I want to do is I want to take the A to Z portion of it that has a little bit longer text and move it into other areas, and stone and masonry would move into this resource guide.
Yep.
Okay. I think as long as that can be done quickly, and we have the reason why it was sequenced in this order was so that we could, as Lloyd previously said, so that we could complete sections of it and adopt them and have them released. So if this is going to be something that if this is going to be a change that we can make, and we can get whatever assets are required, and we can relay all of that information over to Kirsten in
Reasonable time, in
days, not months, then I support it.
Okay.
If not, then I think we should leave it the way it is. I mean, the reason why there's nothing in resource guide 6 right now is because we just haven't worked on it. I mean, it hasn't been a priority in the same as resource guide 7. I mean, these were things that we were leaving until we were done with everything else. We haven't completed everything else. I feel like I must go on the record of saying that I wanted to adopt the text of this document in January of 2021. I was told that this would be done soon. It was not. So yes, if you feel like this is something that can be done quickly, then I fully support it.
Okay, because what I'll do is I'll pair pieces of information out of the A to Z guide that I think should be in the resource guides that are subsequent. And
Right.
I'm not going to worry about incorporating that text right now. I'm going to focus on extracting that information from that so that it's more compact and it isn't as repetitive.
Great.
Okay.
And
All
I
right.
chime in about the, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, do we want to hold off on the approval of minutes until 2 weeks?
Yes.
Fine with that.
Yeah. I was just gonna say, Andrea, for the architectural style photos,
Mhm.
can you have a list of what we need and addresses? Because I know
it's-
you labeled some and they're,
Okay, I created, are you talking about the folder I created on our Google Drive?
yeah.
Yeah.
Because I was gonna just suggest that I go around to whichever houses and take the pictures so they're all kind of the same, and I can correct them in Photoshop, the perspective and kind of like,
Sure.
make them all more
I
Um,
only used your pictures or Sean's. All of mine were way more specific. They were things like doors and stuff.
Oh, okay.
Non-permeable surfaces. So like everything that's a picture that I took was not really a facade of a structure. But yeah, Todd, I do need, you know what, I'll email you tomorrow morning. Cause I gotta like look at, I only have like, I think 2 properties that I need pictures of. So I
Yeah.
need like a good example of like, and I went through, oh my God, so many photos. I need an example of, I don't have my list handy, but I need a good example of like a stick style house and then a mid-century modern or mid-century residential structure. One that I would really like, they have a nice clear shot of and happens to be across the street from you
Yeah.
is my friend Claudia's house, which is on Wall and Chestnut.
Yeah.
I have a pretty good example in my own neighborhood, but it's totally obstructed by these like crazy big rhododendrons. So you
Okay.
can't really see the house or the facade rather. And then I think one of the so I looked at people's recommendations in the bubbles there. One was my neighbor Mike Robinson's house, who's on the corner of Northern and High Street, as an example of a stick style house. If you want to take a picture of that, rather than dealing with me sending you a picture that you then have to correct.
Yeah, if you could just send me an email with the addresses, I will
Yeah.
go out. I'll go out this weekend and do it, and then I will add
Thank
them
you.
to the folder and
Thanks.
and
Yeah,
label.
add them to that folder and
Yeah.
then we're done with that section. Yeah, because I definitely pulled from your photos and Sean's photo
Okay, cool.
folders.
That's easy enough. I'll do that this weekend. Just send me the addresses.
All right, thanks. I
Cool.
will.
Okay.
Great. So just one other thing, since we're getting into the summer, can everyone just make sure that they just double check the meeting calendar for the summer months and just mark off any dates that you're going to be out of town? I know I'm going to be out for the workshop meeting in June, but just so that we're not caught off guard with
No
vacations,
quorum. Yeah.
that would be very helpful. And
Got
if we
it.
need to move anything around, and best case scenario, we get to cancel some of the meetings in August if there's no applications, but. Can I make a motion to adjourn?
Yes, you may. Do I
Right.
have a second?
Consider this my motion.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 All right. See you guys in
It
2
is
weeks.
9:25.
Bye-bye.
Good night, everyone.
All
Good
right,
night. Thank you.
Bye.
Night, everybody.
Bye,
Good night,
Karen.
Karen.
Bye.